You don't have programs, yeah. George wrote us
They're texts.
text. George wrote us a fine piece called "The Person in the Room Wishes to Be Left Alone," with Benjamin Rogers, who wrote the text for it. And we're basically gonna have a quick pre-concert chat with George about his writing and the way the piece is. Maybe first of all, you could describe the inspiration for the piece. And
Sure.
Sort of background stories.
So when Zach and Elizabeth commissioned me or talked about this project and talked about themes of loss of innocence and childhood, I went to my longtime collaborator, Ben Rogers, who we've worked on 5, 6 projects before. He writes the words and I write the music. And I just went to him and say, well, this is a theme. I'm not entirely sure what to do with this because I don't know. I didn't feel much connection to that theme in the onset. And so he thought about it a little bit more. And while he was thinking about it, I came across this story in an online journal. I forget what it's called now. But basically, there's a real life story in the 1920s of a girl named Barbara Follett, who was actually local to Boston. I think in the Massachusetts area, and she's a child prodigy. She wrote a novel that was a bestseller. It was published by Random House, and she did that when she was 14. She got a lot of support from her parents for writing. She would go into her room every day after school and start typing on her typewriter and nonstop. And she would shut the door, and actually there would be a sign on the door that says, when she's working, that says, "The person in the room wishes to be left alone," and that's the title of the piece. But she would work really hard on writing and always with a typewriter. And she published this book, and it was a bestseller. And then, I think somehow the whole thing changed because once you're sort of deemed a child prodigy and you have some really, you have a bestseller out, people expect a lot of things of you. So I think that and several other factors with that, she continued writing, and there was another book that came out. But for some reason, when she was turning 19 or 20, she met a man, and they lived together for a while. But then, all of a sudden, one day when she was 20, she just left and disappeared. And her parents looked for her for a long time, but just never found her. So I think it's suspected that the guy that she was living with probably cat.
There's pets here.
Probably, I don't know. There was some shady things going on, but it was sort of a sad story. And so I took that and I gave it to Ben and say like, well, do you respond? Can you respond to this in some way? And he thought of combining this story or elements of the story with the fictional character of Margot Tannenbaum from The Royal Tenenbaums. So it's a favorite movie. How many of you have seen The Royal Tenenbaums? It's a pretty good movie. And Margot, the character played by Gwyneth Paltrow, also this sort of sad, lonely girl who, when she was, I think, 16 or 17, left home for 2 months or something like that in search of her biological parents because she's adopted by the Tenenbaums. And she came back with 2 fingers missing, and that was sort of the intrigue of her character. And both of these characters, real life and fictional, I think was the impetus for these texts. And there are 6 movements that talk about that. So,
well, to talk more about the movements, they're miniatures.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
What made you decide to do something like that? Or was the text is miniature too?
The text is miniature, and I think I might have told Ben I wanted 6 miniatures because now and again I write really short pieces because it's actually nice to get them done quicker in succession and to yeah, in a way. I mean, I was stuck. I was stuck for a while, and I didn't know what to do. So I thought, well, let's revisit the device of writing miniatures because that gets me writing quicker. And
because it's like a constraint.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so I know that, right now, like when I'm sitting here, I need to come up with something like 3 to 4 minutes, and that's less daunting than 20 minutes. Yeah, and so anything that can get you to write something on the page. I think it's always
And
good.
had we said, we capped it right at 20 minutes or something?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we're very generous.
But yeah, so that's why there's and they're short little movements. Yeah. So that's.
Right. The other main part of this piece is that it has a playback component.
And
that completely surprises when you.
really?
Well, I think first you asked if I owned a typewriter and if I could
That's right.
bring it to concerts.
Sorry.
Then you're a little bit nicer and gave us audio files.
Yeah, the idea was to have Elisabeth sitting down with one of those like really old Remington typewriters and just typing. Because who has a typewriter anywhere anymore? And,
We actually performed
and the last piece of music that I remember having a typewriter is Leroy Anderson's The Typewriter. So I wanted that, but then I thought it's hard to tour with a typewriter. Really, I mean that's just cool. So it became a tape, but I also added that tape component. Again, I would say that the combination of saxophone and voice for me was also difficult at the onset.
Right.
So. I mean, I cheated, is what I had more stuff, but hopefully in a way that, really conveyed both instruments are usually only playing both instruments are playing one note at a time, for, more lyrical lines. So you're talking about a play between two different voices,
right.
A singing voice of the saxophone, very similar to a singing voice of the soprano. So how do you fill out that sound with other things is why I wanted to do the tape part. And you'll hear different things on the tape part, typewriters, but also there's a movement, the second movement, it's ocean sounds. That's the only movement you'll have ocean sounds. It might sound more like white noise, so white noisy ocean sounds. But you'll hear some of that in there too, and yeah. But I wanted to add also that at the onset, both the subject and the instrumentation was challenging. But I think after I worked through some of these things and figured out how to deal with it with the subject matter, and also with Ben, working with Ben on the text, it became easier, and it was really fun to try to figure out how I could deal with these constraints of this instrumentation and also this idea of childhood and loss of innocence.
Let me say, I've worked with George. George and I are in an opera company together. I know his music. We've worked together, and so when we commissioned him, I felt like I had a sense of what sort of thing we would be getting. And I was totally wrong, and it was really exciting.
Well, what surprised you, or George? What's maybe different about this than previous work?
What surprised me? See.
Or surprised Elisabeth?
Oh, what surprised you? Sorry.
No, I think you have a certain style. When we talk about it in our opera company, like, oh, this part sounds like George, and you have. I love your writing, but it's like I feel like I can always identify it as a George Lam piece, and this is just very different, much more sparse, and with the recorded tape, I'd never heard anything like that before, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a different challenge because I do a lot of things with thick chords and thick sonorities. So again, I mean that's part of the reason why I was like, what am I gonna do with saxophone voice? But it was a good challenge. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you. My part has a lot of these in third intervals. Sometimes switching between major and minor.
Right, which will tie in great to the thirds that came before us. I have no idea.
Thematic,
Thirds. You'll hear it's a little bit about what you're going to hear in the very beginning. So after a certain prologue of a taped part where you get this sort of radio theater idea of someone coming into a room, sitting down and typing, and then and Zach begins this figure. And yes, I mean, I think you're emulating that thinking of the typewriter, and I don't know. I also like I like the fact that you can get a sense of this undulating harmony, static harmony for a while, really suggesting a stasis, which is kind of the music I enjoy or can inspire me. I love John Adams, I love Steve Reich. So that kind of thing, that kind of idea with just one person setting that up, you only get snippets of that, of those patterns. And then meanwhile with Elisabeth sort of singing over it, I think that's what I was getting at. To suggest a longer, a more full texture.
Right.
Yeah.
After you gave it to us when we started rehearsing and then worked with you, was there something that surprised you about the way we did it, or things that you thought came out differently from what you expected?
I think, what do you think?
Yeah, we were awesome.
No, it's been a while, right? Like, it's like a year and a half.
Or in general, in the way you write. Is it surprising when you get it in the hands of a performer and then they're interpreting it and doing something?
I mean, I think it surprised me that how well, I think, the sound of the saxophone really blends with the voice in many respects. There are times, of course, that they're really quite different. But I mean, once you get them in close enough quarters, especially in the movement, in the fast movement, where you all kind of are very interlocked. I mean, you get a sense of that it's very homogeneous, which I think I was pleasantly surprised, and which was nice.
Yeah.
Well, we should now play your piece.
All right, awesome.
Thank
Thank you.
you so much.